The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the trading post. I had been counting the days for months, memorizing every word of her letters, picturing the soft brown curls, the delicate hands folded neatly in her lap, the shy green eyes that made my heart ache from across miles of prairie. Every plan I'd made, every corner of the house I'd prepared, every wildflower planted along the front steps, all of it had been for Violet. The wagon rattled down the dusty path, and my stomach tightened as the dust cloud grew, a silent herald of her arrival. My hand hovered near the rifle resting across the seat of the wagon, a nervous habit I didn't even notice. And then the wagon door swung open, and a figure stepped down. My breath caught, but it wasn't the delicate woman from the letters. Her hair was pulled back harshly, darker than I'd imagined. Her hands were calloused, strong, the kind of hands that could tame a horse or wrestle a stubborn steer. Her green eyes, though, those eyes were alive with fire, not shyness. "You must be Boon Carter," she said, her voice slicing through the heat like a whip. "I'm Ruby, not Violet." Ruby. Something in my chest tightened, the ground beneath my boots shifting even though I hadn't moved. She filled her simple brown dress differently than anyone I'd ever seen. She could face a thunderstorm without flinching. Her gaze held mine, and for the first time in months, I felt unprepared, exposed. I asked about Violet before I even realized it, the words rough in the midday air. Ruby's jaw tightened, barely perceptible, and she pulled a leather satchel over her shoulder. "There's been a change of plans," she said simply. "Some things you need to know. Things I was never meant to tell." "The letters," I said slowly, "the ones she'd been sending for months. The carefully crafted plans." Ruby didn't answer right away, just studied me, and I felt every instinct in my body scream that this was more than a miscommunication, more than a missed connection. Her presence carried weight, a gravity that made my heart pound in a way letters never had. This wasn't just a stranger stepping off a wagon. She carried secrets, dangerous secrets. And as I climbed onto the wagon seat, gesturing for her to follow me to the ranch, I knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The ride to the ranch was quiet, but the silence wasn't empty. It buzzed with tension. Ruby sat upright beside me, hands folded in her lap, her green eyes scanning the horizon as if every ridge might hide danger. Every so often our gazes met, and I felt that same spark I'd imagined in my letters, only sharper, more alive. It wasn't Violet I had fallen for through ink and paper. It was something real, dangerous, and utterly unplanned standing right beside me. By the time we crested the last hill and the ranch stretched before us, painted golden by the setting sun, I realized the house I had so carefully prepared for Violet felt hollow now. The curtains were new, the floors freshly scrubbed, wildflowers lined the porch, but they were for a woman who would never live here. Ruby's eyes swept across it all, sharp, calculating, and yet there was something softer hidden beneath that intensity. She didn't comment at first, just looked, studied, and I felt exposed under her gaze, as if she were weighing every intention I'd ever had. I asked her, cautiously, why Violet had never wanted to marry. Her words came slowly, heavy with exhaustion, but steady. Our father had left debts, she explained, and Violet was scared, a girl of 17 forced into decisions too big for her. Ruby had written the letters, arranged the meetings, created the illusion of a future she didn't want, all to protect her family. And then came the twist I hadn't expected. Violet had run, driven not by fear of me, but by a man named Marcus Dalton, a schemer who painted my intentions as dark and vile. Every sentence she spoke twisted the world I had built in my mind. My bride, my letters, the plan. I realized it had all been a shadow, a fragile illusion. And yet, Ruby's presence, her courage, the way she faced danger without flinching, offered a strange anchor. She wasn't my intended bride. She was something far more urgent, a key to survival, to uncovering the truth, to facing the storm I hadn't even known was coming. By the time we reached the porch, I understood that the next few days wouldn't be about romance or comfort. They would be about survival. And with Ruby, someone I'd never expected, I felt both fear and an undeniable surge of hope. Whatever lay ahead, I wasn't walking into it alone. Inside the ranch house, the familiar scent of pine and dust hit me, but it no longer brought comfort. Every corner I had polished for Violet now felt like a stage set for a drama I hadn't auditioned for. Ruby moved through the rooms like a shadow, cataloguing everything with an intensity that made my chest tighten. Her hands brushed over the hand-carved furniture, the fireplace, the kitchen table, each touch deliberate, revealing a mixture of admiration and subtle critique. She was sizing up not just the house, but me, the life I had built for someone who didn't exist. I asked her directly about Dalton, my voice low but steady. She told me about the letters he had shown Violet, lies spun to make her believe I was some kind of serial schemer, a man who collected women through correspondence and sold them off to strangers. The truth hit me like a hammer to the chest. A 17-year-old girl had fled my home not out of love or fear for me, but out of terror for her younger brother, Thomas. Dalton had taken him 3 days before the wedding. As Ruby's words sank in, anger and helplessness clawed at me. Every plan I'd made, every hope I'd nurtured, was being dismantled by a man hiding behind forged documents and false threats. And yet, Ruby's presence steadied me. She had risked everything to reveal the truth, to warn me, to arm me with knowledge I didn't yet fully understand. I could see the weight of sleepless nights and hard choices etched across her face, but also a determination that made me feel, for the first time in months, that we might still have a chance to reclaim what Dalton had stolen. By the time dusk settled over the ranch, the stakes were clear. Dalton wasn't just a threat to Violet or my reputation. He was orchestrating a plan that could destroy everything I had fought to build. And Ruby, fiery and relentless, had become my only ally. Together, we would have to face what came next. The quiet of the ranch no longer promised safety. It promised a reckoning. The evening shadows stretched across the ranch as I moved through the rooms, my mind racing. Every creak of the floorboards sounded louder than it should, every whisper of wind through the trees a warning. Ruby followed silently, her satchel slung over her shoulder, filled with the evidence she had brought to reveal Dalton's scheme. She didn't speak unless necessary, but I could feel her assessing every detail, every potential weakness in our position. Her intensity was electric, a quiet fire that kept me on edge but also focused. Then the sound of hooves on the trail shattered the tense quiet. I froze, my hand instinctively gripping the rifle by the fireplace. Ruby's eyes met mine, green and unwavering. We both knew what this meant. Someone was coming for us, someone connected to Dalton. And the timing was too precise to be coincidence. A man approached on horseback, moving with the deliberate confidence of someone who believed they owned the land and its people. As he drew closer, the badge glinting in the fading sunlight confirmed my suspicions. The sheriff himself had arrived. My stomach sank. The man had long ties to Dalton, and now he stood on my porch, the authority of law twisted into a weapon against me. Ruby moved closer, her presence grounding me. She had planned for this moment, I could tell, but the risk was clear. One wrong word, one impulsive move, and Dalton's reach would strike through the sheriff and crush us both. And yet, in that charged silence, I realized that the fight wasn't just for my ranch, my life, or even Violet and Thomas. It was for truth, justice, and survival. The sheriff dismounted, hands near his gun, and I knew the next words he spoke could determine everything. Ruby's hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch that reminded me I wasn't facing this alone. Whatever happened next, we would have to rely on cunning, courage, and each other. The sheriff's boots crunched on the porch boards as he approached, slow and deliberate, every movement radiating authority and menace. I could see the faint glint of his revolver at his hip, and I knew he wouldn't hesitate if he sensed defiance. Ruby stayed close, her body tense but controlled, her satchel pressing against her side as if it were armor. She didn't speak, but her eyes told me everything. I had to stay calm, I had to think fast. The sheriff's gaze swept the house, lingering on the windows, the doors, even the barn beyond. He didn't see just a man and a woman. He saw evidence he thought would justify Dalton's lies. The complaint Marcus Dalton had filed earlier this week painted me as a fraud, a thief, a kidnapper, and now this man had come to enforce those accusations as if they were gospel. I felt a surge of anger, but I swallowed it, knowing any rash move could trigger a deadly misunderstanding. Ruby's hand brushed mine, subtle but grounding. She had evidence to expose Dalton and the sheriff's collusion, but right now it was a dangerous bluff. We were on our own ground, yes, but the sheriff's authority could tip the balance if we weren't careful. My mind raced through possibilities. Trap the sheriff, delay him, get him inside, distract him long enough to reveal Dalton's deceit. And then he spoke, his voice carrying over the quiet prairie evening, calm but filled with menace. He demanded I step aside, that Ruby leave, that we submit to what he claimed were lawful orders. My pulse hammered in my ears as I weighed the risk. One misstep, and Dalton's plan would be complete. Yet another, and Ruby and I could find ourselves trapped with no way to save Violet or Thomas. I took a steadying breath, meeting his gaze, letting him see that I understood the stakes. Whatever happened next, it would be a test of wit, courage, and trust, and Ruby and I were the only ones ready to play. The tension between us and the sheriff was a living thing, stretching across the porch like a taut wire. Ruby stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, as she revealed a portion of the evidence she had brought. The journal, the letters, the photographs. The sheriff's eyes flicked from her to the stack of documents, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty creep into his stance. Years of loyalty to Dalton and blind authority were beginning to crack under the weight of proof. I stayed close to Ruby, my hand brushing hers now and then, a silent signal that we were aligned. Every instinct screamed that Dalton had planned this, that the sheriff was just another cog in the machine, and that time was running out. The man had already manipulated witnesses, faked documents, and forced fear into a young girl. I couldn't let him continue. I needed to stay one step ahead. Ruby read excerpts aloud, carefully, making sure each word landed. The letters documented bribes, threats, and coercion, evidence of a larger conspiracy. The sheriff's posture stiffened as each new revelation sank in. He had believed in Dalton's story, but now the narrative he had trusted was unraveling before his eyes. I realized then that the fight wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about saving Violet and Thomas, about exposing corruption and stopping Dalton's reach from spreading further. Ruby's determination fueled my own, and together we began plotting the next move. Whoever Dalton had stationed around us, whoever was watching from the shadows, they had underestimated us. And if we played our cards right, we could turn the tables before anyone realized what had happened. By nightfall, the sheriff's authority wavered, the truth pressing into every corner of the tense silence. Dalton's plan had cracks, and Ruby and I were ready to exploit every one of them. But the real danger, I knew, was still coming. Night had fallen completely when the first distant hoofbeats reached our ears. My stomach tightened, a knot of adrenaline and anticipation. Ruby's hand found mine instinctively, and I felt the electric tension pass between us. Dalton's men were coming, riding hard and fast, their purpose clear. They wanted to finish what Dalton had started, to silence us before the evidence could be exposed. We moved quickly, slipping through the shadows to the barn where I kept my rifles and ammunition. The moonlight cast long, spidery shadows across the yard, and every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of dry leaves, the creak of boards beneath our boots, the wind whispering through the hills. Ruby loaded her pistol with deliberate precision, while I checked the rifles, my mind running through every strategy, every possible advantage we could seize. As the riders neared the property, the first shot rang out, and chaos erupted. One man tumbled from his horse, his companions throwing their bodies into the fray. The fight was fast, brutal, and relentless. Bullets kicked up dust and splinters, screams cutting through the night as we ducked behind barrels and the corner of the barn. Ruby moved with uncanny precision, taking out threats with a calm I could barely comprehend. Through it all, my focus never wavered from her. She wasn't just my ally, she was my anchor, my partner in this deadly dance. Every time our eyes met, I felt a surge of certainty in the midst of chaos. We weren't just fighting for survival, we were fighting for truth, for justice, and for the lives of Violet and Thomas, whose fate hung in the balance. By the time the last of Dalton's riders fell back into the darkness, I realized the night had changed everything. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Dalton's hand stretched further than I had imagined, and we had to act fast before his reach struck again. After the chaos of the firefight, the ranch lay in uneasy silence. Dust settled over the ground, and the faint smell of gunpowder lingered in the cool night air. Ruby and I moved quickly to the barn, our eyes scanning the shadows for any lingering threat. Inside, I lit a lantern, and the warm glow revealed stacks of hay, saddles, and tucked away in the far corner, the hidden trunk Ruby had insisted we check. Her hands trembled slightly as she fitted the key into the lock, a subtle mix of anticipation and fear etched on her face. The wooden box inside contained letters, photographs, and documents that detailed Dalton's schemes, his manipulation of witnesses, his forged evidence, and the blackmail he had used to bend people like the sheriff to his will. Every piece of paper told a story of betrayal and greed, a map of Dalton's plans to control not just my ranch, but the land and people around it. As we sifted through the evidence, Ruby revealed the most critical piece, a letter from Violet herself, hidden weeks ago, describing a place called Miller's Canyon, a remote hideout where Dalton held her and Thomas. My heart sank at the thought of the boy, only 14, trapped in the hands of a man so cunning and cruel. The realization that Dalton had gone further than I had imagined, beyond lies and manipulation, into kidnapping, made the stakes unbearably real. Ruby looked at me, determination burning in her green eyes. "We have to move quickly," she said, voice firm, carrying both command and reassurance. "If we don't act now, they could vanish into that canyon, and we'll lose them forever." I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling over me. This wasn't just about protecting my life or clearing my name anymore. It was a race against time to save 2 innocent lives, and Ruby and I were the only ones who could do it. The ride toward Miller's Canyon was a tense march through darkness and rough terrain. The moon hung low, casting silvery light over the rugged hills, the shadows of gnarled trees stretching like silent sentinels across our path. Ruby rode beside me, her hand steady on the reins, yet her eyes never stopped scanning the horizon. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a twig, made my heart leap. Dalton's men could be anywhere, waiting, lying in ambush. I felt the weight of the lantern in my pack, its flickering glow a reminder of the fragile hope we carried. Ruby's presence next to me was reassuring, yet electrifying. Her calm, her bravery, and her certainty in our mission fueled a strange surge of courage within me. I realized then that this woman, this unexpected ally, had become my anchor in the storm of chaos Dalton had created. Hours passed as we climbed rocky inclines and maneuvered through narrow ravines. The canyon's reputation as a hideout for fugitives became obvious with every jagged cliff and sudden drop. I could see how Dalton had used the natural barriers to his advantage. One wrong step, one miscalculated move, and the canyon would claim us as surely as it had trapped our enemies. When we finally spotted the cabin perched between the canyon walls, guarded by 2 men, my chest tightened. Ruby signaled, her gaze locking with mine, and I knew the plan was simple but deadly. Precision, timing, and speed. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet prepared, driven by a desperate need to save Violet and Thomas. The bond between us, forged in fire and fear, gave me a steady hand and a sharp mind. Tonight, nothing else mattered. We had one chance. We crept closer to the cabin, hearts pounding, every footstep calculated against the rocky ground. Dalton's 2 guards lounged lazily near the entrance, oblivious to the storm approaching. Ruby's hand pressed against mine briefly, a silent signal that we were ready. We moved like shadows, slipping behind boulders and low brush, each step bringing us closer to the prisoners. I could feel the adrenaline sharpening my senses, every rustle, every whisper magnified, every shadow a potential threat. Ruby unlocked the cabin door with a key we had retrieved from Morrison, the quiet click echoing in the tense night. Inside, Violet and Thomas huddled in the corner, fear etched into their faces. Relief surged through me, but there was no time to linger. Dalton was inside, and one wrong move could end everything. Ruby swiftly cut the ropes binding them, her hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. Thomas's eyes shone with frightened courage, while Violet clung to her sister as though she were her only lifeline. We barely had a moment to exchange looks before Dalton appeared, rifle in hand, rage twisting his features. I raised my revolver, every muscle coiled like a spring. Ruby moved in front of Violet and Thomas, pistol at the ready, a fierce guardian protecting those who could not defend themselves. The firefight erupted in a blur of sound, shouts, gunfire, the smell of smoke and powder filling the cabin. Each shot fired, each move made with precision, pushed Dalton further toward defeat. When the last of Dalton's resistance fell, silence settled over the canyon like a heavy shroud. The danger had passed, the hostages were safe, and the weight of what we had endured finally hit me. Ruby's hand found mine, fingers entwining with an unspoken promise that we had survived, together. Tonight, we had faced death, deception, and betrayal, and emerged victorious. But the final step awaited. We had to return home, reclaim our lives, and confront the truths left behind by the chaos Dalton had sown. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, the tension finally easing as the stars above stretched endlessly across the night sky. Violet and Thomas rode between Ruby and me, safe for the first time in days. The moonlight cast soft shadows over the rugged terrain, and with every mile, the weight of what we had endured began to lift. I kept my eyes on Ruby, the woman who had stepped into my life unexpectedly and carried us through danger with unwavering courage. As we crested the final hill, the lights of the ranch glimmered like a beacon. Relief washed over me, but there was a sense of solemnity, too. Dalton's schemes had caused chaos, but his influence had ended. Federal authorities would ensure his actions were met with justice, and Morrison's complicity would be exposed, freeing us from any lingering threat. When we rode onto the porch, Violet ran into Ruby's arms, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Thomas clung to me, his young shoulders trembling, but I held him steady, promising protection and safety. Ruby stood close, her hand brushing mine as we shared a quiet, powerful understanding. What began as letters, misunderstandings, and danger had transformed into something real, something lasting. In the weeks that followed, the ranch thrived, the land untouched by Dalton's reach. Violet and Thomas found peace, and Ruby and I rebuilt a life together, one forged through courage, trust, and unbreakable bonds. Standing on the porch as the sun rose, I realized that the twists of fate that had brought Ruby to me had also given me something I had never expected: true partnership, love, and the strength to face any storm. Sometimes, the wrong path leads to the right destination. And for Ruby and me, the journey had only just begun. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, deception, and unexpected love, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to catch more unforgettable Western stories. Your support helps us keep sharing adventures like this one.